So in this video, I'd like to continue my discussion about the 8 consciousnesses. In the video previously, I talked about how some Buddhist teachers may use the word soul just for the sake of convenience for especially non-Buddhists to understand the idea of consciousness. And I'm not saying that the consciousness or the soul is the true self. It is not. This is still an illusion. So the alaya consciousness is also an illusion. But let me work through in this video a more thorough explanation. So depending on the lineage of Buddhism you practice, so in Theravada Buddhism we hear about the 6 consciousnesses, and in Mahayana Buddhism we have the 8 consciousnesses and even the 9 consciousnesses. So these are not contradictory. They're simply different ways to explain the same thing. In Theravada Buddhism, the last 6 consciousnesses also include the 7th and 8th consciousness. And the 9th consciousness, they simply added Buddha nature on top as the 9th consciousness. So in 8th consciousness system, if we transform the 8th consciousness into the mirror-like wisdom, then that is also the Buddha nature. That is also emptiness, which we will explain in this video. And the system of the 8 consciousnesses really provide a great and practical framework for us to understand the mind, how our mind functions, and also for us to know why exactly all sufferings in life are actually self-generated due to our attachment to illusions and separation. And I feel this is really one of the most important things I've learned in Mahayana Buddhism, and it really helps me to understand better how the mind works. So as we discussed before, how we have the first 5 sense consciousnesses, our eye consciousness, which is associated with the forms, the objects we see with our eyes, and the ear consciousness that's associated with the sound we hear with our ears, and the nose consciousness is associated with the smell, and the tongue consciousness is associated with the taste, and the body consciousness is associated with touch. So these first 5 sense consciousnesses, they simply capture the information from this phenomenal world. They don't have any attachment or separation. And then it comes to our 6th consciousness, which is our mental consciousness. And that is like the mind where we generate a lot of thoughts, our likes and dislikes, whether we understand or not understand, and our preferences and all this kind of thoughts which create separation. And then we go into the 7th consciousness, also known as the defilemental consciousness or the manas. This is associated with the attachment, the ego attachment. So once we have sort of decided our likes and dislikes, and then we move on to our attachment, and we could be attached to our ideas, our thoughts, our perceptions, and whatever mental formations that we might have formed from the 6th consciousness. And then all these impressions from all these 7 consciousnesses will all go into the final consciousness, the 8th consciousness, also known as the alaya consciousness or the storehouse consciousness or fundamental consciousness. So the storehouse consciousness stores everything, absolutely everything from all the previous 7 consciousnesses and from all our past lives for countless eons. And when we reincarnate, it's exactly this alaya consciousness that will reincarnate from one incarnation to another. So if we think about the human mind, it's like a biological computer. And the first 5 sense consciousnesses are like the external components to the computer. For instance, the eyes are like the screen, the ears are like the speaker, the body is like the keyboard, and all this. So they simply just receive, capture, and gather the information. Whereas the alaya consciousness is like the CPU, the central processing unit, that once it gathers information, it can execute instructions. The alaya consciousness is sort of like the boss behind all this. So in Buddhism, the alaya consciousness is also known as the heart. Or in English translation, usually translate as the mind. So in Buddhism, when we talk about the mind, we also mean the heart or consciousness. but this alaya consciousness is still an illusional mind. So the alaya consciousness is also associated with ignorance because it stored absolutely everything, including our attachment, our separation, all the 3 poisons, 5 poisons, all the developmental states, all the good and bad are being stored in the alaya consciousness. And that is why it is still an illusion. This is still not the true nature of the mind. So although we talk about the 8 consciousnesses separately, they really operate as one. It is the one heart. So when we see something or when we hear some noises, immediately we will have the thoughts, our judgments, or whatever opinions we might form about the objects or the sound or the taste that we might have just experienced. So immediately we have the separation, and immediately it may give rise to attachment, and immediately all these informations and impressions have already stored in the alaya consciousness. And the alaya consciousness stored all the past life impressions which formed the karmic seeds for our future karma. So in Buddhism, you might have also heard the underlying tendency, like why sometimes we have like the habits, maybe the bad habits, not why some of us may be more prone to maybe anger or prone to jealousy. So all these emotions, behaviors, and underlying tendencies are dependent on the karmic seeds that are stored in the alaya consciousness, and it generates the karma. Depending on which karmic seeds are stronger, underlying tendency are stronger, then it will drag us to the corresponding realm of reincarnation in our next lives. So if we have a lot of a seed of the name of Amitabha Buddha stored in our alaya consciousness, then we're guaranteed to seek rebirth to the Pure Land. So the difference between us and an enlightened being is that an enlightened being have no attachment. So the base level of enlightenment, the state of Arahant, has no attachment. And then for bodhisattvas, they have no separation. So they have somehow transformed the consciousness into wisdom. So in Buddhism, we also talk about how we can transform the 8 consciousness into the 4 kinds of wisdoms. So in fact, the purpose of all our Dharma practices, whatever we're practicing, is actually to transform the consciousness into wisdom, especially beginning from the 6th and the 7th consciousness, from our separation and attachment. When these 2 are transformed into wisdom, then our 8th consciousness, the alaya consciousness, will also be transformed into mirror-like wisdom, which means that one can perceive everything as it is without attachment, without separation. One can perceive the suchness of reality as it is, and this is also our Buddha nature. But first, we need to learn how to actually transform the 6th consciousness and the 7th consciousness. So the first 5 consciousnesses, they simply capture and gather information from the external world. So they have no attachment, they have no separation. But it's really when it comes to our mind, to the 6th and 7th consciousness, that is where the problem lies. So the 7th consciousness is our attachment. How we can actually transform our attachment into the wisdom of equality. So in fact, all sufferings are self-generated due to our attachment to illusions. Why the thoughts are illusions? Because whatever we think is all impermanent. That's why we call it illusion. There is no need to grasp on them. But it's really our this underlying tendency to grasp, to be attached, our feelings, our mental formations and activities. So that is why we suffered. However, this consciousness, the developmental consciousness, can be actually transformed into the wisdom of equality. That is like non-attachment, when we become more lighthearted and not take things so seriously, especially those negative ones that do no good to us, that would take away the peace of mind in the present. So it's really important that we shall transform the 7th consciousness into the wisdom of equality. So we're not so much attached to these illusions. And how we can do that is through meditation. So for Nianfo practitioners, it would be through the Nianfo practice, by repeating the name of Amitabha Buddha, by transform all our attachment to illusions to the attachment of the name of Amitabha Buddha, to infinite light and life, to our Buddha nature. That is how we can actually transform the seventh consciousness into the wisdom of equality. We just treat everything as it is without so much attachment. And also the sixth consciousness, our separation, it is the same. So it's easy for us to find opinions like, we like this, we don't like that, this is good, this is bad. All this separation can cause a lot of disturbances to ourselves, to take away the peace of mind in the here and now. And we're not saying that there is no right and wrong, but it's like we really don't need to create more separation and afflictions within. What we can do is also through meditation. For Nianfo practitioners, it would be again through Nianfo, through Amitabha recitation. By repeating the name of Amitabha Buddha repeatedly, it can also help us to transform our separation to the name of Amitabha Buddha. This will help us to treat everything with more lightheartedness. For enlightened beings, they can transform the sixth consciousness into the wisdom of wonderful observation. So they just simply observe without separation. So when the seventh consciousness has been transformed into the wisdom of equality, so with no attachment, and also when the sixth consciousness has been transformed into the wisdom of wonderful observations, then automatically the eighth consciousness will be simply transformed into this great mirror-like awareness, great mirror-like wisdom. So it's just become like a mirror that reflects everything, but without attachment and separation. Because there's no attachment and no separation, one's heart is unconstrained by anything. One's mind is totally free. It's like the mind of the Buddha. The Buddha has no attachment, no separation, just like a peaceful ocean. Whereas us, we have a lot of waves on the oceans, and usually we grasp on the waves. The waves are like all these thoughts, emotions, and perceptions that we might have, and we take them really seriously and we really grasp on them. Because of the grasp, the attachment of the mind, my emotions, my feelings, I'm right, and all these kind of ideas and separations, this is what would generate us a lot of suffering. It's like we are so blind or so narrow-minded that we could only see the waves and ignoring the whole peaceful ocean. Whereas the Buddha realized these waves are just illusions, they come and go. So it's not necessary to be attached to them, also not necessary to create any separation. After all, the waves also belong to the ocean. The true nature of the waves is also the same as the true nature of the ocean. And also because the consciousness has been transformed into wisdom, the first five sense consciousness will also be transformed into the all-accomplishing wisdom. Sometimes we can't really perform well with the five sense consciousness. It's because we have so many thoughts, so many attachments, so many blockages that sort of stop us from doing what we want to do. So that is why without our attachment, without a separation, without all these obstacles, then one can make good use of the five sense consciousness and to achieve whatever one wants to achieve. So that is how the Bodhisattvas, the Buddhas, they adopt skillful means to help save sentient beings. But because they have no attachment, or they're not attached even to the idea of helping others, although they will perform the actions, but they have no such attachment. They also have no separation. They will not think that they are superior than others. So this will not be in the mind of the Buddha and Bodhisattvas, because they don't have separation between themselves and the sentient beings. They see everyone as the same. They really see the Buddha nature in all beings. And because they have no attachment, no separation, hence there is no suffering. They can always be at ease, no matter what they do. That is why we don't hear the Buddha complain that he's so tired by doing so many things, by helping others. We don't hear Guan Yin complain about that. We don't hear Amitabha Buddha complain about that, because they are totally at ease. Their heart, their mind is unconstrained. They have totally realized the true nature of the mind. When we say one has realized the true nature of the mind, what we're saying is that one simply perceives everything as it is, without attachment, without separation. So because we're not enlightened yet, so we will still have our attachment, have our separation, but at least we know now we have tools that can help us to transform them when those attachment and separation arise, especially those harmful ones, those really negative ones that really do no good to our mental health, to our well-being. So the practice of Nianfo is a really efficient way to help us transform our attachment and our separation. Okay, so it's a lot of information in this video, but I hope you gained something from it. Namo Amitabha Buddha. Namo Amituofo.